Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Tony Bourne. I'm the Executive Director of the Fresno Council of Governments, kind of James' counterpart down here in the Central Valley. I'm joined today by Simran Judy, who is our Program Manager, Transportation Planner here at Fresno COG, as well as Adam Wasserman and Lois Yates with GLD, Global Logistics Development Incorporated, who are consultants on the projects. GLD are global authorities on goods movement, logistics, supply chain issues. So we're really pleased that they're on board. We've got a PowerPoint presentation here. I'm going to take you through relatively quickly. But I would encourage you, if you have any questions or anything while we're going through this, don't hesitate to ask. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end of the process. So again, when you think of the project, think of a kind of a public dimension and a private dimension, because it really is what this is about. So go ahead and Renee, go ahead, let's hit that first slide. Go ahead again. We've got some, yeah. So again, what's an inland port? We hear about an inland port. What is exactly? Well, we basically put together that the common use of the term indicates a facility that is located away from traditional water ports that facilitates international trade through investments in multimodal transportation assets and promotes value-added services as goods move through the supply chain. So again, that's something we put in there because depending on your level of familiarity with transportation or transport, you may or may not have a feel for what an inland port actually is. So the idea, the concept behind the inland port system is to take these common facilities and integrate them, not just the efficient movement of goods, but catalyze an intersection between economic development, sustainable platforms, and next generation's technologies to produce a more resilient and stronger supply chain. So I'll take another look at that sentence, because that's really what this is about: catalyzing the intersection between economic development, sustainable energy platforms, and next generation technologies that will basically bring a great improvement to our quality of life and environmental quality here in the Valley and Sacramento area. So again, creating a system that is multidimensional and seamlessly functions as an extension of a seaport. Next slide, please, Renee. Okay, so this, wait a minute, go back a slide. Did I miss one? Did you? Yeah, okay, so again, fifth largest economy in the world. That's self-evident. We're all aware of that. Next slide, Renee, please. Okay, so this is we put the slide in here to try to provide some context for people who may not have an understanding of how goods move throughout the country. Again, with our project, we're focusing on the ports in California, specifically the ports of LA and Long Beach, because that's where the majority of the goods come from through Fresno. We're talking through the ports of LA and Long Beach. And then ultimately, most of those make their way north through the state via trucks. So what we're talking about is trying to develop a intermodal system of transport for these goods that will improve our air quality, reduce GHG, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So next slide, please. Again, so this slide represents the port of LA there. Then you can see the major goods movement corridors. And again, for me, this slide, I see the east-west corridors, right? But I don't see the north-south corridor, which really what our project is about, kind of filling in that gap. Next slide. So that's kind of what we're talking about, that geographic area there. How can we improve the goods movement in that area to make it more multimodal, reduce criteria pollutants, reduce VMT and greenhouse gases, etc. Next slide. So keep hitting it there. So what you're going to see here is you're going to see a series of green dots. Just keep clicking on that, Renee, that represent the system, right? So here's a system of 4 inland ports, potential inland ports that would be reliant on, basically, I think you're all aware that we have 2 Class 1 railroads that serve the valley, that run north-south through the valley, and they run parallel to State Route 99. So the idea was, how can we take advantage of the railroad to remove some of the goods from the trucks, right? How do we get those goods into the railroad as opposed to the truck, and then move them north into the San Joaquin Valley? And then also, how do we remove goods that are leaving the San Joaquin Valley and Sacramento region, primarily agricultural goods? How do we get those out of the valley? What can we do? How can we improve that situation? So connecting California, again, this whole idea, I think, as I understand it, was kind of sprung from Gene Soroka, who's the director of the Port of LA, who understood kind of supply chain issues that were, happening for him. Again, this, I think 10 or 12 years ago, he came up with this idea. So next slide, please. So in terms of the background, it was formally launched in 2019. Kind of what happened was, I think after our consultants, Adam and Lois, had been working with Gene on a number of different projects, and at some point they brought in California Forward and had the conversation about what's the feasibility of developing kind of a intermodal system, rail truck logistics system here in the Valley. Would it pencil out? Would it make sense from a private sector side? What would the public benefits be if we were to do this kind of thing, right? And so again, when we talk about the $30 billion investment, that's with the private sector investment it's anticipated as well. So this will all make sense as we get into it, right? And again, the idea that we need to look for every opportunity to create new high quality jobs in our disadvantaged communities, right? Both in the Valley and the Sacramento area. Next. So who are the partners here? You can see we have a lot of partners. It's a very complex project. The state of California is involved. The federal government has given us a $1 million grant. We have had all of the air districts are involved, the South Coast, our San Joaquin Air District, Sacramento, the transportation world, the NPOs, the RTPAs, all of those, the ports, I mentioned the Los Angeles, Long Beach, and then also as well as the Port of Stockton. On the private side, we've got the shippers, inbound retail and industrial supply chains, as well as outbound agriculture, and then the rail, truck, and the clean energy companies and the infrastructure, right? So I'm going to take you through these first 10 or so slides, and this focuses really on the kind of the overall public sector. Then I'm going to turn it over to the GLD team, and they'll talk about the actual private side, the trade port concept itself, and what that looks like. Next slide, please. So the project overview, if this thing comes to pass, it will be the largest and most sophisticated logistics corridor in the world. Again, we're talking about a transformational project. Again, integrated multimodal cargo transport and hubs, right? We talk about the seaports to the markets using trucks and rail, replaces the all truck conditions that currently exist, which is basically what we have now. And then these trade port investment districts, which are the centerpieces of the long-term investment strategy for this project. Highly efficient cargo movement is at the center of this. Again, next, I think there's one more there. Yeah, again, this project is focused on a clean propulsion platform, whether it's electric or hydrogen platform. All of this is intended to help, move the ball, move the needle, catalyze the shift to this sustainable transportation, sustainable energy platform for transportation that we're talking about. Kind of just in terms of, they say timing is everything. When California Forward and GLD came to us, and I'm the executive director for Fresno COG, but I'm really serving as the project manager for this project on behalf of all of the 8 Valley COGs and James at SACOG as well. So that is kind of my role in it. This isn't a Fresno driven project. It's a project that we believe is very beneficial to all of the state of California. Unfortunately, there's no one out there really in the government sector that is in charge of of bringing all these pieces together and making them happen. And I think what's happened with this project was when it started, again, in 2019, right, when they started the project, we hadn't had the 2020 election yet. The Biden administration wasn't in place. The supply chain crisis hadn't sort of hit its peak moment, right? All of those things kind of happened after we had the study underway. Well, it was just this very fortuitous timing that the state of California, the federal government were all recognizing that they were committed to moving to this shifting, right? Are moving from fossil fuels to alternative energy when it comes to transportation. So all of those things coming together at the same time, the fact that the private sector sees the potential and the benefits, and I think they see which way the wind's blowing, all came together. It's right around the time this project was sort of coming to fruition. So this is really kind of the right project at the right time, and reflects, we had received nothing but positive support from everywhere we presented. So next slide, please. Again, focusing on the logistics connectivity or development of the trade ports. Again, the focus on the clean energy, creating jobs, making the valley, our valley and the state as a whole more competitive. And again, modernizing our industrial development here in the valley, both Sacramento and the San Joaquin valleys. Next slide. So these 6 points are really, I think, kind of the essence of why it's so easy to sell this project, right? So number one, it's going to result in a more efficient national supply chain system. It will substantially reduce GHG and air criteria pollutants in California. And again, sustainability is built into this thing. It's at its very project core. It will significantly increase the economic competitiveness and opportunities, especially in our rural challenged areas here in the valleys and Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley. It will reduce VMT, road congestion, and maintenance costs, increase traffic safety through remote shifts. So the idea, if we can get trucks off of State Route 99 or any of the state highways, that's a good thing from a safety perspective. Reducing the VMT, that's a greenhouse gas benefit. Reduces maintenance costs, less wear and tear, on and on and on. More safety because we've gotten people out of, we've gotten the goods over onto the rail line. Again, the timing of this with the opportunity to bring in social equity and environmental justice and those concerns and have those stakeholders be a part of the process. That's all built into the planning process. And then lastly, promote collaboration and partnership across the public and private sector. So again, these are all, objectives from the public sector, right? That's why we believe that it's a good project, but the project has to make sense for the private sector, whether that's the shippers or the rail. So next slide, please. So this slide here, basically in the feasibility study, the phase one, these were some of the early numbers that were put together. So you can see we're talking about reducing NOx emissions by up to 84%, greenhouse gases 93%. And again, the idea that reducing truck congestion around the ports of LA and Los Angeles, that's a very good thing. That's an important thing. So again, the project has the potential for great environmental benefits. Next slide, please. So keep going there, Renee. We'll just call all these up here. So again, we're talking about, again, it's a very complicated process. You saw all the public sector stakeholders. Well, on the private side, there are just as many between the shippers and the ports, right? And the rail people and, on and on and on. But we feel very good that we are bringing all of those people into the loop, all of those different industries into the loop. This is where GLD's value comes in. They are connected to that world and they understand that world from a private sector perspective that quite honestly, those of us in the public sector just can't get to because this is not what we do full time. I mean, I have my limited understanding of goods movement and I've learned a lot more through this process working with Lois and Adam, but still it's clear there is just so much out there to learn and we appreciate GLD being a part of this. Next slide. So the project's gotten a lot of attention, a lot of good press because it has a lot of benefits. So that continues to be the case. Next slide. So this is the California Inland Port Market Zone. Go ahead, Renee. There's a 3 or 4. So there's your Port of LA. That's our market area, right? 14 million people overall in that yellow area in general. That includes the Bay Area. 31 million if you include Los Angeles. And again, look at that 1.1 million. That's truck equivalent units move annually, right? Basically from the ports up through the valley, all via truck. Again, it's 425-mile long zone. We have 2 Class 1 railroads that run up and down the valley, being UP and BNSF, right? And our Central Valley hubs serve both the Bay Area and the LA markets, right? I mentioned earlier about the consumer goods coming in, those are the inbound goods, and by and large, the agricultural products are our outbound goods. And again, the 74% of the containerized cargo moves via the LA region ports, which is really just the number that astounded me. So you can see on our slide there, that distance that we're talking about, that's equivalent, that 425 miles is equivalent to the distance from Washington to Boston. So and we were on the East Coast, we talked about 7 states and DC. Here we're talking about basically the San Joaquin Valley region, 8 cogs, and the Sacramento region. I think you guys have 6 counties, if I'm not mistaken, and 1 cog. So, okay, at this point, I'm going to turn over to Adam or Lois, and they're going to cover these next slides where we talk about the trade ports themselves and the kind of the private sector perspective, and then we'll get into some questions and answers. So take a look at that map there. Those 4, we've got some other exhibits in here as well, but those 4 green squares, those represent the potential trade ports that we're going to talk about here. Adam and Lois are going to focus on. And then we're also talking about satellite facilities, which are really sort of truck charging facilities. So if you hear us say satellite facilities, we're also envisioning satellite facilities in all 9 of the counties, which would be, in essence, be truck charging facilities. So again, between the 4 inland ports, trade ports, and this system of 9 satellites, we think that we have a really good concept here to help move goods through the valley and improve our air quality and reduce VMT, et cetera, et cetera. And with any luck, the private sector can make some money, so we all win. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam or Lois and let them take it from there.
Hey, Tony, do you mind before we just go to Adam? I just want to make sure to see if we have any questions, any clarifications, because it's a lot, right? Sort of you're wrapping your heads around.
Yeah, I hear you.
A lot.
I've got a ton of questions, but I suspect many of them are going to be answered in this next segment.
All right.
See the rest of
All right.
But I will stop right there. Tony, you did the green squares representing the ports, and then you were talking about the satellites. Was that simply the charging stations?
Yeah, think of the satellites as truck charging facilities.
Okay.
Right? And then you have the 4 trade ports that would be intermodal in nature.
Okay, and so the 4 ports are all deep water ports?
No, they're inland ports. They would be located between, they would be sited between one of the class 1 railroads and our state highway. So in the valley, 99 pretty much runs parallel to our tracks. So again, the inland port is located in the valley, right? But it serves the same function as the port that you would encounter on the water.
I can share the other exhibit in a little bit or right now, depending on what you think, Tony.
The idea, if I've got it right, this is why I wanted to pause and ask a question, make sure you got, is to basically take all that intermodal in LA, Long Beach, and take it by rail up into the valley and then transfer it to truck.
Okay.
That's the.
So the fact that we were talking inland ports, I was thinking the Port of Sacramento, the Port of Stockton, reutilizing those. They're on the deep water channel.
Yeah. James is right. I think for me, it works. It's easier to understand if I think of focus on the fact that the majority of the goods come from south to north via trucks, right? And what can we do to eliminate some of those trucks? And how
That word port can be
yes.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I also noticed in your slides, you've got commercial aircraft, but you're not talking about that in your presentation. So are these airports part of that?
Yes, you're going to get to that when Adam and Lois talk here about the trade ports and kind of more the details of what that would look like.
All right, thank you. I'll shut up now.
Tony, this is Adam. Lois will take it from here. I'm going to have to leave in a little bit, but let me just sort of summarize what you all were just getting to. This is a spine that's an extension of the largest seaports complex in the United States and North America, LA and Long Beach, which handles most of the cargo moving in and out of the country. Well, that's the largest share, I should say, but most of the cargo moving in and out of California for sure. And it's to build efficiencies, clean energy efficiencies, supply chain efficiencies for cargo. It's the onslaught of cargoes moving through those ports is crazy. They're overloaded. The supply chain crisis nationally is in part because they can't process the cargo through those ports. Anything we do to make them more efficient means it's of a national benefit and certainly a supply chain benefit into California as well. But it's not really just truck to rail, it's dual mode. So it's on one hand taking, yes, trucks off the road by creating a rail corridor from the ports to the entirety of the market area. And we know there's a lot of railroad activity that runs through, and there's rail lines and they're transcontinental rail lines, but in fact, they are running through the area. There is no intermodal service between the ports complex and any place in that yellow oval. So it's the antithesis of what the state and most public sector leaders want to see is can we take trucks off the road? It does reduce air pollution. But that's not where this project stops. It says there's still going to be a lot of trucks. There's 20,000 trucks that move from the ports complex into the market area every week. If we're very successful with creating intermodal rail activity, it won't take all those 20,000 trucks off the road, and that market's only going to grow as well. Trucking is becoming more and more difficult, so the more we can take off, the better. It's not going to be easier to be a trucker. Costs are going up. Congestion is not going to be necessarily decreased. Ports complex congestion is awful. So yes, trucks off the road. Let's say we take 20–30% of the trucks off the road. Big benefits. There's still a lot of trucks remaining and the market will grow. So the truck component of this is rather substantial as well. So it's all about clean truck, clean energy, clean powertrain. So companies like Daimler Trucks and PACCAR, the manufacturers, are deeply involved, as are the electric utilities in many cases already, and other players. So it's clean energy on trucks, it's intermodal rail, hopefully clean, and Sacramento is doing some things with clean rail right now as well. And the connection to these inland ports, which Lois will describe, and ultimately an air cargo outlet is important that we understand the air cargo element for companies that will locate in these inland port areas and will either regularly or episodic-like have a need for air cargo. And if they can't get access to that in an area south of Fresno, what does it mean to the project? So we want to make sure air cargo is a party to it as well. Lois? You're muted. You're muted.
Also, to the air cargo situation, we know that when you look at the types of products that are produced, the agricultural products, the other products that are manufactured in this market area, there is not as much need for air cargo. But as Adam just said, when you need it, you really need it. So that can be, it's not going to be as important to the project in the long run, but it is an important part of it that we have to be able to provide that service and that connectivity by air when it's needed, because you can shut down a manufacturing plant for weeks because you don't have one part. So it's really quite critical. On the slide in front of us, we have what we're showing the trade port logistics and investment zone. And at the very center of that is the logistics core. And that logistics core is what we have been talking about a bit already. It would be the intermodal rail facility, and it would be something that we're calling a truck mobility complex, where we would have a facility where trucks would come and be fueled and be able to transload goods from the rail to the truck. Also, there would be some warehousing capabilities that would be located in that truck logistics core. And we're anticipating that that would be about 300 acres. But an important part of this project is the investment zone that's going to be able to go around this logistics core. We've done a number of scenarios and taking actual projects that were considered in California and looking at if there had been better connectivity in the Central Valley and the Sacramento area, would this project, this area been chosen as a site selection for a company? And we have found without a doubt that the connectivity element that we're talking about in this project could make a difference in being a winner or loser in a new facility being located in California. We're looking at the satellite trade ports in each of our counties along this network. There are already well-established areas that, where businesses being, trucks are coming in and going out. And we'd like to use those satellite trade ports to be able to put the clean energy assets in and to be able to ensure that the emissions and the environmental issues in the areas have a beginning to be solved, because the traffic from the satellite to the logistics core, would be the clean energy trucks, and that would really enhance the ability of the air to be cleaned up in the area. Next. This is just a schematic showing you what the logistics core would look like. You have the rail intermodal, and then you have the truck mobility complex. Can we go to the next slide? This shows it a lot clearer, but this is what we're calling the logistics core. This is a prototype of a rail intermodal complex. That's not to say that is what they're going to look like in the Central Valley and the Sacramento area, but this is how they will be laid out. And so you have your highways coming in, and you have your truck mobility center to the south of that, and you have room for truck charging and fueling and parking, because that's an issue for all of y'all. And you have a truck technology maintenance center, you have retail services, you have cargo handling, and you have on-site distribution facilities. Another important thing I think that we are very cognizant of is that as the trucking community moves more and more to autonomy and autonomous trucks, we think that this truck mobility complex is going to be a critical element to the transferring of goods from autonomous trucks to manned trucks for delivery into communities. So the truck mobility complexes are going to be very, very important. Next. And this is going through the whole process. You have your rail line and you have your highway, and back to our air cargo hub. We have that listed in here as well. So we have the truck mobility, or the truck trade port logistics core, which has the rail on one side, the highway on the other. And then what we are trying to show by this is how the investment district can be built around this trade port logistics core, and the types of opportunities that can be brought to the Central Valley and the Sacramento area that perhaps they're not really competitive in right now, because of the connectivity that this logistics core and the ability of the intermodal operation can bring to the area. So these are just different kinds of projects that we think could be competitive. And as I mentioned before, we did do some scenarios on actual projects that had considered California and did not consider California and did not choose California, and that we were able to show that the connectivity element would have made a difference in those decisions. Next. This is an example of an op-ed that was co-authored by two of the congressmen in California, and this was really great because it showed that it was a bipartisan support, that this is something, the time is right for this. We have this perfect storm with the logistics issues, the supply chain issues, and the congressman felt very, very strongly that this is something that is exactly right and is needed right now. Next. These are the people that are involved in the delivery of this California Inland Port system. First is obviously under the leadership of the Fresno Council of Governments on behalf of the other COGs in Sacramento, all the way down to the Central Valley. Tony has performed an unbelievable function in this whole project, and it would not, quite honestly, it would not have happened. As Tony said earlier, this is nobody's job, and Tony has taken upon himself to be a leader with the COGs and to make this start to happen. I'm with Global Logistics Development Partners, and we're working on the clean energy, the P3 part of it, the public-private partnerships, and logistics. We have an engineering company as part of our team, Jacobs Engineering, and they're also going to be working on clean energy, but engineering and planning. We have Remprex, which is a rail system planning company and infrastructure company. We have Zayo, which is a telecom data infrastructure provider. They're very strong in the Sacramento area. We have Nossaman, which is a law firm out of Los Angeles, which is a leader nationally on putting together public-private partnerships. The California Fuel Cell Partnership, which is located in Sacramento, is a part of us in terms of the hydrogen policy and infrastructure. And we have Daimler Trucks as a truck manufacturer and clean powertrains. They're doing both autonomy and hydrogen and electric trucks. Next. As we had said before, the project began in 2019, and it was designated this fall, in the fall of 2021, as a regional infrastructure accelerator by US DOT. There were 5 locations designated across the country as these projects of national significance, and this project was one of them. It is a partnership with the Build America Bureau of the US DOT, and they're going to help us develop a public-private financing structure that makes sure that this project can happen. Right now, we're looking at about 20% of it as being provided by the public sector and the rest of it being provided by the private sector. Next. The RIA process, real briefly, will look at the development of an organizational entity. There's got to be somebody that runs this. So that's what we're working with Nosselman on right now, the legal and regulatory analysis of the options available for creating an organizational entity, defining that structure, and then establishing the procedures and policies. And then the next part that we'll be working on with US DOT is a development of project pipeline. I can't say those 2 P's. And all the projects that will be put in the pipeline and how we will use public-private partnerships to enhance leveraging public funds and private funds and making this project happen. Next. The project going, Tony, do you want to come back in and talk about this?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So in terms of the history, right? So this started off as a planning study, right? And the intent of the planning study was we were going to identify the best locations for the inland ports, right? And again, the MPOs, the COGS, that's what we do. We do planning studies. Okay, so that's the project made all the sense in the world to us from a planning perspective. We saw all the benefits. I mean, it was really kind of a no-brainer. All right. Well, then what's happened, and you guys are well aware of this, the state identified a significant, probably once in a lifetime budget surplus, right? And that combined with the fact of the supply chain crisis and the challenges at the ports, right? They took some of that money in the budget, $1.2 billion, and identified it for supply chain crisis kinds of projects. 300 million, 25% of that is designated specifically for innovative pilot projects, which we think this project, fills that bill, absolutely, right? So we think we're optimistic that we may be able to land some money for an actual project to get the project kind of up and running, some seed money, that kind of thing. But again, a little bit different. Normally in the MPO world, we're just dealing with planning studies, and then ultimately the study is the study, and it either comes to pass or doesn't, but it's really outside of our world. If you're a self-help county, maybe you're more involved in that. But in this case, with this budget surplus and the fact that the state of California and the federal government this is the right time, right? Again, this is all about, the future. This is a transformational project. I was driving in today thinking about, you may have heard this saying before, Wayne Gretzky was a very successful hockey player, right? And but basically what his thing was, he skates to where the puck is going to be, right? And so that's what this project is about. This project is getting out in front of where the state and the federal government are headed with the sustainable energy and trying to shift transportation to that platform. So we just feel like this project is the right project at the right time, and we're excited about it. And we're very thankful that James was open to bringing Sacramento region into participating in it. And we're just kind of looking forward. The call for projects, we anticipate the guidelines to be finished, I believe, Simran, here at the end of the month or shortly thereafter. Then I assume they'll allow a couple months for that call for projects and things to get submitted. So as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of going up and down the valley, meeting individually with each of the COGs and making sure we have a clear understanding of what's happening in their region with regards to goods movement, whether that's operational goods movement right now or planned goods movement facilities, whatever it may be. And we're actually meeting with James and his team next, I think on the 6th. So that process is underway right now, but ultimately it will result in an application for some of that supply chain crisis funding. Next slide. Yeah, so that wraps up the presentation. I know that's a lot of information that we laid on you there in about, I don't know, 40 some minutes. Yeah, 40 minutes. So don't be shy about asking questions, or if there's something there we covered that we may have covered too quickly, please.
I'll jump in if nobody else wants to, Tony. Paul Joyner again. I'm just curious, your list of partners was absent one very important partner at least, which is Union Pacific. They're their rail lines. They know their capacity. They know their willingness to cooperate in something like this. You've obviously reached out to them and had conversations. Where are they on this?
That's a good point. That's a great point about adding that to the to that slide. Go ahead, Lois. You want to?
Oh,
On to that.
we have very carefully worked with the railroads. We're working with both of them, incidentally. We're working with BN and UP. And it was our strategy has been designed around approaching them, keeping them up to date on exactly where we are in the project and how we're going forward. And we're putting together a business case. I was the head of economic development in a number of states, and I learned the hard way of working with the railroads. And so we felt very strongly that we had to have a strong business proposition to take to them and not go and ask for their permission. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And this fall, we will be presenting that business proposition to them. They will be involved with us in choosing locations, or giving us criteria for locations for the rail facilities. That will be the first part of involvement with them, and then we are approaching them with our offer and our business proposition. So far, and any of you that have dealt with the railroads, the conversations have been very good, very open. But we have in the fall, we will be presenting them our formal business proposition.
Just following up on Lois's comments. So the project has sort of two dimensions, right? So that was one of the questions early on. Well, yeah, that's great, Tony. But what if the railroads, you know how hard they are to work with? What if they don't play ball? That just kills the whole project, right? And the answer is no, it doesn't, because again, as Adam mentioned, there's also the dimension that focuses on the satellite truck charging facilities. So if in the event we can't get the railroad to play ball, then we still have our truck charging facility dimension component to the study, which we think may have a lot of potential.
And Tony, as you know, it's been very interesting in our conversations with the railroad. When we first started talking to them about this project, they, especially UP, was more vocal about this. They admitted that they were going to have to be looking at things differently, and they are beginning to look at things differently than they had in the past. They always had an assumption that it had to be a distance of 500 miles, 600 miles before you put an intermodal in. And as y'all know, they're not real happy with California. They haven't had a really good, strong relationship with California over the years. But they're having to look at things differently now, and so they are willing to listen. So that's where we are right now.
Good, that's helpful. Thank you. Just another curiosity, and forgive me, this is the first time even thinking about all of this. Another element for me that's missing, and just the logistics of goods movement, and all of this traffic coming into Southern California. What about the Port of Oakland? What about the deep water opportunities we have up here to shorten those distances yet again, and maybe get multiple inputs into this system up and down the state, rather than just coming out of LA and Long Beach?
Right. Do you remember the one thing I'll start out with in answering that, you probably don't remember this on the slide earlier, but 75% of the goods that are moving out of your area and the Central Valley all the way down are going to the Port of LA. They are not going through the Port of Oakland. So that was an eye opener for us. It was just an unbelievable eye opener when we did that. But early on, we went to the Port of Oakland. There was a different port director then, and he kind of said to us, I'm going to be real honest with you. He kind of said to us, well, good luck with that, because he really wasn't very supportive of the idea. And we had known Chris Lytle for quite a while. So it wasn't like, we knew him and we were able to have an honest conversation with him. They have a new port director now. We have met with people from the Port of Oakland. When the Port of Oakland decided not to join us in the beginning, GoBiz told us, and OPR, in state government, told us to go ahead with the project and just base it around the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. But we have met with them since then, and we're hoping that as this goes along, that they will come aboard. A lot of what is happening, the shipping lines have a lot to do with this, whether they're willing to make calls, further north. So there are all kinds of ramifications that go into this. There are all kinds of elements that go into this, and it's not an easy thing to deal with. But at the same time, the Port of Oakland has reached out to us, and we're talking with them right now.
Yeah, it's not as if proactively we've been trying to get them involved from day one. Kind of confused me from my transportation planner role why they wouldn't, but then as we get into it, I learn more about the kind of the parochial nature of the competition between the ports, right? And these kinds of things. So.
Got it.
And
Thank
in
you.
regards to the Port of Stockton, we've met with San Joaquin County, and they're on board. They actually think they may have a site that might work real nice. So.
Yeah, Stockton is on board, and they've been a real good partner so far. We've enjoyed working with them.
Now, I guess I'm tempted to ask, what kind of goods movement planning have you guys done there in your region? Are there any sort of candidate locations that has kind of jumped to the forefront based on the planning that you've done up to this point in time?
James has stepped out of the room. I don't know if Casey.
I don't know if we have anything on that right now, but we are doing our EV, the freight study, which this came up in that conversation of how those relate. I know we've also been talking about this bigger concept and candidate sites as we've been approached by, EV companies directly to see how it all relates. And I think we've actually responded with, well, what about this inland port study? We should be having this conversation collectively. So yeah, I think there's a lot more conversation to have on that.
Yeah, so we have the meeting scheduled on the 6th, right, with the SACOG staff to dig into this in a much greater detail.
Right.
So
yeah, and actually I did forward that invitation today to Sam Shelton, who is going to be doing our heavy duty, medium duty freight study. Because he'll be great to have in that conversation with input.
So I know that Placer County is proposing a truck charging station at the conjunction of 80 and 65, right along, frankly, the rail system as well. It doesn't lend itself to a 3,000 acre campus in that location, but it could be a part of all of this. And
Absolutely.
Obviously the Roseville rail yards are just right there. So they could conceivably play a pretty big role in this.
Well, I would just add too, because we didn't go over this in our presentation to you today, but we are going to be going out with a site selection process. And we have put together a matrix of what we're going to be looking for. So that will be going out like the 1st of November. So there'll be about a month's time to respond to that. So these are the kinds of things that you're just talking about that we want to hear about. We want to be able to have that as a choice as we look at where we put these facilities.
Can I ask a question on this? There's the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center out in Nevada along 80. Are these somewhat modeled along with those or similar to, or is there an intent to connect to that? Because that's a huge trucking logistic.
Right. And that started, like, as you said, an industrial park, and then it's built up over the years. But what we're trying to do is, it is similar, but we want to have this based on green energy, current technology for the future, not current technology for the future. We want to be planning the next generation kind of truck facility. And for instance, when you have your autonomous trucks, I think we're going to see autonomy first in trucks before we see it in cars as common. And it's going to be, I mean, right now, I live in Arizona, and right now there are trucks going from California all the way over to Texas on a daily basis, autonomous trucks.
Yep.
They're being tested on that Interstate 10 highway system. But what's going to happen, we think, in the very beginning is that these autonomous trucks will pull off into an area, and then it will be changed to a man truck, because the mapping that's necessary in these urban areas is going to take a lot longer than anybody ever realized. So this is something that we are planning for, that we're designing our trust mobility complex for, so that we're looking for the technologies of the future and making it more than an industrial park. That somebody has to go in and buy a piece of land, that it's all planned. It's sort of a plug and play kind of opportunity, but it is the next generation edition of an industrial park.
Simran, can you share that trip generation? So we have a map here that was, now this doesn't include the Sacramento region, so you're not going to see a bubble up there, and that's one of the reasons why we want to meet and make sure we have a good understanding of, so that's the, kind of the potential trade. That's a conceptual map to try to help explain, what this project is, right? So you can see the blue things there are the truck charging facility, the satellites. That's actually an electrical outlet, in case you were wondering. So you'll see 9 of those in each of the counties, and then the 4 trade port locations. Again, those are just potential locations. Share that truck trip generation map with the circles, the bubbles, because then I think people can see how this kind of coincides with that. You got that there, Simran?
I think we remember it. It's the one with the blue, and then you drop in the yellow circles.
Yeah,
north
well,
and
no, this
south.
one actually has the, we actually have a map that shows where all of the trucks are being generated throughout the valley. There you go.
There
we
you
go.
go.
Okay,
There
but
you
we
go.
don't have it for the Sacramento region yet. So that's the intent, is we need to figure out where that bubble is in your region, right? So again, if we were to put those side by side, you can kind of see the relationship between the two. So there is some, we're just not randomly identifying, put something here, put something there. Great, Simran, that's great. You can kind of get the idea there.
In our original study, in our original feasibility study, we did, when we analyzed the market, we purchased data from IHS, which is the leading data firm for this kind of information. And it's much, much more complex and complete than the federal government is able to provide. And we were able to track how many goods were moving from each of these points to the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, as well as the Port of Oakland. And that's how we came up with our numbers. So it's fascinating to see the load centers that are going to be all the way up and down the corridor. You're going to see coming in from the ports at LA and Long Beach, you're going to see consumer goods, and the market has to go the market goes all the way up to the top, up to Sacramento and up to the Bay Area because of these consumer goods, because that's where the bulk of the population coming from out of LA once out of LA is concentrated. But when you turn around and you have this network that brings ag goods back out of the area, back down to the ports, it's almost evenly divided. It's amazing how close it is. And those load centers are evenly distributed throughout starting at Sacramento and going all the way down to Bakersfield. They're evenly distributed all the way through the market area. It's pretty, I was shocked when I looked at the numbers. I had to, we had to redo them several times to be sure they were accurate, but.
Well, as I'm looking at the Sacramento County numbers right now, I have them in front of me. So the exports from LA, 22,541 TEUs, exports from Oakland, 7,054 TEUs.
Yeah.
And we can give you a lot of detail in terms of what those actual are, but again.
Yeah, you see that, yeah, and that's a perfect example. And each of the load centers are very similar. Each of the counties are very similar. We were quite surprised that there was so much already moving all the way down to Los Angeles.
Hey, Tony, it's James Corliss. I had to step out and pick up a phone call, so I'm sorry if you covered this, and maybe this relates to Director Joyner's question on the railroads. Do you have a sense, so if you're basically thinking about, rather than taking trucks, right, up 5 and 99 from Port of LA, Long Beach, the trucks go up, they come back. The idea is almost extend the port north, so you're doing more rail traffic and then shorter truck trips. Do you have a sense of like rail capacity? I mean, or is that something you have to kind of work out with the railroads? Because that's one of the things that we're working with the railroads on. It's the capacity, all the issues that the railroad has in serving the market, even currently, even though they're not doing intermodal service up and down, they are running up and down through the state. But James, it's interesting because, our country is based on, and when Tony showed you that original map, our country is based on, especially for rail, east and west. It's not north and south. So it's fascinating to see how they've sort of ignored some of the north-south opportunity. Yeah, no,
And one bad word that you use is called shuttle. That's a word that, 10 years ago, the railroad would have kicked you out of the room with. But now, as I said earlier, they are admitting that that they're going to have to change the way they do some of their business. And if we're talking about rail service that would come out of Los Angeles, go all the way up to the top of the market in Sacramento and come back down again, heaven forbid we should use the word shuttle, but it could be something that would go, run just north and come back down south on a regular basis.
Well, what they're going to have to learn is that they are not in the railroad business. They're in the goods movement business.
Very
And there are
true.
multiple elements of that they can take advantage of as technology changes.
Yep. Good comment. Very good.
I know we want to wrap here soon, but obviously we're real interested in the technology and the zero emission for the trucks, but depending on when you could pull this all online, I would imagine that you've got markets with a lot of trucks that are still running on diesel, right? So
Yeah.
how do you
Yes.
basically go to zero emission? And then of course if the railroads want to play, it seems to me like they're going to want the best market they can get and as many trucks to interface with them as possible, right? So
Yep.
because I love the idea of the clean trucks. And then, but in terms of site selection, then you've got another, I think what we want to be mindful of is seeing this as an economic development play and to get trucks off the road play. But if we're kind of the end of the corridor, we become the end of the corridor. Whoever, if people are living right around there or trying to like, you know, walk or travel right around there, that's going to be quite that is not going to be the nice place to be, or the, you know, so we got to be just, I think we can be
Exactly.
thoughtful about that.
Exactly. Very good comment. And that's something that's part of our site selection criteria, is taking into account the community elements. And we've got to have community engagement ongoing from the very beginning. We're in the process of putting together a website right now for the inland port, but we're also going to have a second website, which is just about community engagement for the inland port. Because it's going to be critically important. And if we're talking about doing something for the future, the brightest and the best for the future, it has to be really well done.
Hey, Lois and Tony, I did not see this, but I think one of our directors, Carm Baines, has his hand up in their virtual hand up there. So go ahead, Carm.
Thank you. Sorry, but going back to the statistics that you guys mentioned about the ports and the number of shipments that are going out of there, how recent is that statistics or the information that you guys have there? What year were those?
It was 2019.
Yeah, so I'm just again, I mean, you guys know that there was the port strikes and that type of stuff
Right.
that happened. Being a fourth generation farmer, I don't agree with the numbers that you guys have going out of Los Angeles port, because of where all the commodities are grown, that I mean, they might have went out of there, but it was not by choice. So I mean, you know, that we still have port issues right now with getting our commodities to the ports and out of there. So I mean, before diving into the singing deeper, I would reassess and kind of get out into the agricultural world to see where these, you know, where they're really supposed to go from, because we were forced to ship them as far down as from the Los Angeles port. And just to give you a little hindsight, I mean, that before 2019, it was it cost $2,500 to ship a sea container from Oakland to across seas, and now it's costing closer to 25,000.
Oh, I know.
So, no, but I'm just saying that the numbers that you guys are using, that I don't agree with those.
Well, and we'd love to talk to you more about that. We've been talking to growers as well as, as food processors. And so that's, we've tried to maintain that relationship, and we're working with the I don't know if this is not called this in California, but the Department of Agriculture. We're working with them, and we're using the numbers that they give us. But if you're interested, I'd love to talk to you more about this. If you can, on a comment, if you just give us your contact information, we'd love to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. Tony, Lois, Adam, the whole Fresno COG team. Really, really appreciate your presentation. Bring us up to speed. I think it's obviously really important for our region to understand this. So I know there's a lot of work ahead still, including the site selection. So we'll continue to be plugged in.
Right.
I know we'll be talking more.
We will be in touch.
Yeah, we have a meeting scheduled with your team next.
Yeah, we do. We have next. Yep.
Right.
Yep. I got that. I'm sending that. Thanks also for your help here from the whole team. So much appreciated. Hope that was helpful to our electeds here in this region. Yeah, it's one of those many things where it will. We gotta be at the table and helping shape it. So again, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
your time.
It's nice meeting y'all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks.